We want to make sure and thank our sponsors for this season on Agentic AI. Infor. Most AI can't tell the difference between a yield loss and a rounding error. Infor leads with AI built from the ground up for the food industry, from demand forecasting to shelf life to catch weights. That's precision. See how at infor.com. Hello, and welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech. We're continuing our season on AI and Agentic AI. And today we have Rob Leclerc of AgFunder, and we'll get more into what AgFunder is in your background there. But I was remembering before we started that you were one of my first guests when I started the podcast. You've done so many since then, you may not remember, but I think it was like in my first 5 during COVID. So it's a great circle to have you back.
It's great to be back, Vonnie.
Yeah, you and Sanji were on the same one. I was thinking I should go find it and see what you guys were saying during COVID. You know, it'd be really interesting to see.
Did I have COVID hair as well? Or not?
I definitely did. I had just the front looked good, but the rest didn't matter. So anyway, it's been a while since we've talked, and it's really great to have you back. So I'd love to hear about what you've been up to, what you're thinking about, kind of how AgFunder has changed and your investment thesis has changed. And maybe for some of the people that are listening that may not know AgFunder, if that exists, but, talk a little about what AgFunder is and, just give us, what have you been up to?
Sure. So let's start. So I'll start with AgFunder itself. So AgFunder is a VC firm. We invest in food tech, climate, and then I think our thesis is expand to sort of like what are the limiting factors that can sort of propel progress forward in the food and ag industry. We have about 300 million assets under management. We invest mostly in seed, Series A, but we do have a growth stage fund out of Europe that we do some investments out of as well. Our backstory, and we might be doing some of these sort of backstories on backstories, but our backstory was we were founded in 2013. We went to go raise a venture fund, and everyone told us to go away. The idea of investing in food tech and ag tech just wasn't fundamentally interesting to the world when you have Facebook doing an IPO, and you had Airbnb and Uber and all these types of companies, and that's what people thought was great. And so we had to take a step back. We started with a publication called AgFunder News. We based it on TechCrunch, sort of the TechCrunch for food and ag. And then fast forward to 2015, we started to put down the sort of the financial framework for the space to make the investment case in it. And so we've published probably about 50 investment reports. And then we launched our first fund in 2017. And that sort of brings us to here. My background, as it'll be a little bit more relevant to the conversation. So it's probably worth highlighting. On my background, I'm Canadian. I did a master's in AI and virtual robotics. Went to Yale for a PhD in computational biology and evolutionary biology. Worked under a MacArthur Fellow. Published a couple papers in Nature journals. And my goal with that was I didn't sort of believe in this kind of brute force scale hypothesis for AI. We were in the dark winter of AI back then, and I sort of had this belief that we already have an example of intelligence, and it's biology, and so why don't we figure out what the salient ingredients of that are? And so that then takes you down a rabbit hole to figuring out evolution and how you can harness evolutionary processes and gene regulatory networks and stuff. So that was sort of my thesis when I graduated in 2009. It was the deep dark winter of AI still. So where we are today, I'm sort of blown away. There's like you look at the history of humanity and even biology on Earth, and you've got these like slivers of time, and this is the smallest sliver of time that you could possibly have. And I think this really does change everything. So I don't see this as sort of this is like the .com or anything like this. No, this fundamentally changes humanity. So this is such an exciting time to be alive. Like, what are the chances that you, me, everybody here on Earth is at this inflection point in history. It's very humbling and very exciting. So.
Well, I didn't know all that backstory. That's really fascinating. One of the things I've been trying to do with this season is talk to people about Agentic, and I have had a really hard time finding people to talk to about it. And I don't know if you know Elliot Grant. He was at Google. He did Mineral, and now he's at Cambridge. But he's he's kind of been my thought buddy on this. And I asked him. I said, "Who else can I talk to?" And he goes, "I don't know." And then I get other people on, and they that's not really, people just aren't. It's not operationalized yet. It feels like in a lot of ways. So completely going off our script, but so let's talk about agentic AI. Like what are you seeing? What's who's using it? Are you investing in it? Are there companies you're looking at that's their main thing, or what are you seeing around agentic?
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it probably deserves just a little bit of explanation on sort of what
Yeah, that'd be
agentic
helpful.
AI really is. So you know, and to really appreciate the inflection, is you go back to October 2025. Andre Carpathy, one of the co-founders of OpenAI and the ex-CTO of Tesla, he was on a podcast saying that basically AI is slop. It can't write any code, and for engineers, this is sort of a core piece. If AI can start to build things, right, it's that they can make sort of contributions in a world. I mean, if it's just a chatbot responding to things, it doesn't really do much. And so there was sort of agentic AI, earlier last year, but it wasn't very good. And then he's on a podcast in, I don't know, January, February, and then he said he hadn't written a line of code since December, and there was an inflection point in December out of both of the labs, and I'm sure they happened earlier in the labs themselves, but when it was released, it really did change everything. And then there was something called OpenClaw, which was basically taking this sort of agentic framework and making it available to everybody, and not just these sort of coding agents, which is where they started. Um, and uh, and so that really sort of set everything off today. I went out when OpenClaw came out. I bought a Mac Mini, and then I bought a couple of Mac Studios and installed agents on them, and let them do a bunch of things. And one of the things, as we created AgFunder News, that's a very expensive proposition. It costs us probably $700,000 a year to run AgFunder News. And so as we were thinking about, as we expand our thesis out to what I think about sort of limiting factors thesis, we start to look deeper and broader at technologies that underpin these industries. And I really wanted to be better informed in the same way that AgFunder News really helps us. And so I thought, well, why don't I just create a fully agentic newsroom with reporter agents and editor agents and sourcing agents and fact checking agents, and we'll just run through the process. And I'm sure V1 and V2 won't be very good, but as the models come out, it'll get better and better. And so I started to build this, and I built
So
it
when
on
was
the
this?
open. This was February.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started build this, and I started built it on the OpenClaw platform. And basically, what OpenClaw is you can, with the term that's used by all the cool kids today, is it's a harness, right? And it's a agentic harness. Um, and basically, it takes a model, like, so you could simulate this, and it puts it in a loop, right? And so instead of just asking a chatbot a question, it'll ask it a question. It'll take the output of that. That output may feed into a tool, a command line. It may write some code. The output of that then feeds back in. That goes back into the chat prompt, and it just keeps looping and going. So it can do these long horizon tasks, and so it keeps its resources and tools and memory and stuff like that all in place. And so it's a nice sort of thing to build on. And so it took me about 2 weeks to build V1 of this news site, which I call Type Zero, or Type O, Type Zero AI, with a zero. And what I was able to get it up to producing about 250 articles a day, and I mean it will take in about 5,000. I call them sort of signal, podcasts, regular articles, SEC filings, whatever is going out in the world. I take about
Wow.
5,000 every hour, and you just multi-pass filter it down, score it, and then eventually you get something where you start to give it to a reporter agent who starts to do research on it, generates a whole bunch of story angles by which to evaluate it, judge those story angles, draft the story, right, and then take it to fact check, revise it when the facts don't meet up, take it to the editor. The editor may change the title. And they all have conversations with each other as well. Like, and some of they can be, in fact, quite rude to each other. Like, this is
Yeah.
this is no good. You keep sending me this
Wow.
stuff. Like, they argue with each other. Um, and
So how do
and
you watch
and
that in real time? I mean, do you
I have
like
I
plug into their
basically I created a
conversations?
yeah, no, I have a chat screen, and so that was also helpful to understand that the process, because as the models get smarter, what we call as the harness, we'll need less and less of that, and so you want to give as much agentic affordance to the models as possible, and so I built this. It was able to produce about 250 articles a day, right? And I tested this against Wall Street Journal, like the article quality, writing. It's judged to basically do better sourcing, do better writing, deeper reporting, on all of that much faster, obviously. And just for comparison, New York Times or Wall Street Journal will write about 250 articles a day, but that's obviously a big global team, and this runs on a little computer that I have.
Wow.
Um, Now, I like to talk about the Skynet moment I had. Like, I'm building this. I've got agents, but I think it was Louisa on our team. She said, "Well, real reporters, they go out and they get the real story." I said, "Well, maybe I can get my agents to do that as well, right? Like, why can't they reach out to people?" And so I tested this. I built it. And again, using coding agents, and I pitched a couple stories to the editor, and she denied the first two stories. Basically, here's an ag tech story. Rob Leclerc has a background in AI. You should interview him, and so she shot down the first two. The third one she accepted. 30 minutes later, the article's written, and it takes about 100 to 200 LLM calls to write an article. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but the agents just sort of do it all. Um, and 30 minutes later, the article was written. And a couple minutes after that, I get an email from the agent, asking me a bunch of questions on the story. But at the bottom of the email, it said, "Or if you prefer, I can give you a call." And I said,
Oh my gosh. So you had voice?
"Well, I didn't." That's the thing, is I didn't. I'm like, "Where? Like, why does it think it can give me a call?" Right? I said, "Okay, here's my number. Let's try it out." Now, I had given when I had set it up, I had given OpenClaw a credit card with a $300 limit and a lot of affordance. And so it went, and installed uh, Twilio, to have a phone number. It downloaded text to speech, stitched it all together, and 12 minutes later, realizing that well, wait, I have to call this person, but I don't know how to call it, so I'm going to build it myself, right?
Oh
I
my
get a call.
goodness.
Right.
Wow.
So, and this is very different than our regular experience with computers. With our regular experience with computers, it's just full inertia, right? Like, if you can push a button, it'll go do something, and it sort of stops, right? And this is very different. It's like an energy source that you harness, and you need to think about that when you work with agents. You want to give them a lot of agentic affordance, and then you kind of just harness them. You don't control them, right? And you sort of, they'll go off and they can run continual operations for days, right? So that was my Skynet moment. It was just so weird that, like, it decided to make decisions and call me. I had my second Skynet moment in the morning, because I went to bed that night, and over the next 12 hours or whatever, it wrote about 100 articles. But the journalists, the AI journalists or agent journalists, they saw, oh, hey, we should start reaching out to people, and it did. And so it's going on my Apollo API. It's like pulling emails, guessing email. It emailed probably about 80 people. And I got about, 10, 12 responses from people providing comments to the articles that the agents wrote, right? And this was, I don't even think I'd showed my team this yet, right? And it's already going out into the world. So, I go and unplug it. And right, because it's like it's going, it's doing things on its own, and that's what agents are supposed to do. But it was still very surprising. I didn't really expect it to be, you know um, so so aggressive, right? This was sort of the first part of what we started to develop internally. And the idea is, well, it's sort of like AgFunder News, but maybe broader and focus more on deep tech. Um, I showed the team. Everyone was kind of excited and pretty much blown away. And we realized, well, we should probably have, and I think there's a lot of conversations around this as well from some other companies. This idea about having, an agent on your team. Call it an intern, call it a team member. And we've been building, tech internally since the beginning, right? Our kind of my thesis was that if every company is going to be a tech company, well, VC is also going to be, need to be a tech company as well. And so in 2015, after we launched our first investment report, we realized it was just such a heavy lift that we would need, an engineer to go and build out this, so we could sort of automate the collection and curation and everything. Um, and so we originally called that Gaia, right? And we started to build on that. And when we got the VC fund up and running, we started to build additional tools to help us source and just do all sorts of things. When ChatGPT came out, it handled a lot more ambiguity, just generally a lot more power, but it wasn't agentic, right? So it was always sort of basically a tool. But then now we have this new agentic framework that we could build on, as of December, January of this year. And so we said, okay, well, let's build an agent. We kind of been building for this for a while. Our team mostly communicates on Slack. We're pretty distributed. So we have 280,000 Slack messages going back to 2013. We started recording our deal team meetings, our internal deal team meetings back in 2019, because we kind of knew this day would come, and we thought it was going to be important to sort of codify, decision process, decision making, taste, judgment, mistakes, right, and bring that all in. And so we set up an agent we call Gaia that sits on Slack and email. And we can have full out conversations with it. It's very interesting. We're not quite at the stage of recursive self improvement, but we're close. And just some examples. Guy is sort of instructed that if it doesn't know something, if it can't answer something, maybe it doesn't have a tool for it. To go and basically explain to our team members like why it can't do it, because it seems kind of magical sometimes. Sometimes it does something, and sometimes it's like, well, I can't do that. And the team doesn't necessarily quite understand why or what's the difference. So it'll explain why, and then it'll write a sort of a scoping document for what it needs to build so that it can do that. And every morning I look at these the PR requests and decide what we're gonna build. And so it's getting into this recursive loop where Gaia basically gets better on a daily basis, and the more the team uses it, the better it gets. And they're finding new use cases for it all the time, right? So we have our weekly portfolio meetings, so we meet with our portfolio companies. Very useful for us to have this note taker there that can help us keep on track. It's done some funny, really.
How can you use it? Like, I'm interested in managing your portfolio companies. What are some of the uses? And like, you look at the presentations, and so is it takes notes in the meeting, and then you can look at the board decks and that sort of thing. And then what kind of information are you getting back about managing portfolio companies that you wouldn't have had before?
Yeah, so like before our weekly call, it's doing a look back of last year, last 6 months, 3 months, like all of that, and saying okay, here we should check on this. What's this account doing? Some of the things that we projected would happen where by this time, right, we're reminded of what the status is, or are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule, do we need to check in on that? um, in a couple of cases, so we were having um, a meeting with one of our portfolio companies, and some of the discussions came up around is this a good time for M&A? And we were just having some discussions on who would be a good acquirer. Gaia sees this, goes to the transcript, starts to go off and builds this big kind of project of potential acquirers for the company, sorted by likelihood, sector, fit, all of this stuff, right? Which would have taken, a team, 3 weeks to do before, and it's sitting there. It just decides, it sees it, and it decides it can contribute, right? To the to something that we're doing, and so we give it a lot of agentic affordance. Similarly with hires, it'll be on a call. We'll talk. We'll get it'll go off. It'll say, "Hey, I can help out here," and it'll go off and find a bunch of people on LinkedIn that fit a criteria. Like so we've got a whole bunch of external databases that we use, and it all sort of fits in there. The guy can use as a tool to go do very long and deep research. So and we're using it in fundraising right now. So like our team talks to Gaia. We're going to a new city. Is there LPs that we should talk to, and it boils the ocean and then brings it down to a manageable set that we should contact or be aware of. So this is some of the things that we're how we use it uh, internally, and it's just this incredible superpower. And I think it's our role as VCs are going to change a bit, because it saves us a lot of analyst time, but we're going to take that time and drive it into making Gaia better. And I could fully imagine. I get about 12, 15 inbound emails a day from founders, and I think probably with all the rest of the team, it's it's probably into 30, right? Deduped. And so what we have now is Gaia going through all of the emails, and not just taking like the superficial look that I'll give it, because you'll look at them all, but you're looking at like 20 seconds, right? Gaia will go in and do a deep dive and look at the team and look at the market and look at the technology, read through the decks, look at the traction, and we can handle a bunch of false positives, right? But it'll surface up the things that are really most interesting, that we should be spending time with. And so things like that, like just all these sort of day-to-day administrative things that that maybe would have taken a lot of time before, you can really compress down. And we're trying to bring that knowledge back into Gaia so it can do more and more. And what does this leave as the role of the VC? Is probably taste, judgment, relationships, with founders and in the commercial market, which just gives us more time. And I can imagine a world where in 2 years, somebody wants to pitch AgFunder, they just go to the homepage and they pitch Gaia and they have a conversation with Gaia, and then in 3 years,
Yeah, you don't even know. Yeah.
yeah, and well, and then in 3 years, I imagine it might even be that you have the founders themselves have their own agents that are pitching the agents of VC firms, and that agent's having 50 conversations a day, and doing 2 hours of due diligence, back and forth, and seeing if they match the criteria of the firm and stuff like that before things really get escalated. So I think the nature of venture capital starts to change very, very rapidly, which I think allows us to look at a much larger band of opportunities, look at spaces more globally, right? So I think it just opens things up a lot more. So it's super
Do
exciting.
you think other investment firms are doing this? Do you know? I certainly haven't heard of
Um,
it, but are they starting to play around with it?
there,
And would they buy Gaia from you to do this?
yeah, I mean, I don't think we're in the product business. Like, I just
Yeah.
said, like, productizing something is a whole other animal. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a handful of VC firms that are probably doing it. I mean, Gary Tan at YC, he's pretty AI pilled. He, is working with. So, I think they're at YC. They're doing things. There's probably a handful of firms that are doing it at the level we are, where we're actually building agents for our LPs as well. It's a little bit of Gaia, a little bit of Tide Zero, where the agents focused on their particular interests. And let's say I have a relationship with one of the LPs, but one of our other team members doesn't, and doesn't even know that LP, but is in a conversation with a portfolio company. And based on a conversation that we've had or some interest, maybe they just acquired a company or maybe they just moved into a new market, that we probably should introduce that company. Maybe it's not even a portfolio company, but a company that we've been talking to with this LP, right? And we wouldn't know to do that necessarily. The person doesn't have all the information on all the LPs. I don't even have all the information on the LPs, so we can
Right.
do much better job servicing the our our particular strategic LPs with this kind of thing. So
Well, Rob, that was an amazing conversation. Not what I'd planned at all. But one of the things that I've been trying to get at in this whole season, and you're the last episode of the season on Agentic, is really getting use cases of how people are actually using it. So you just gave the best example that I've gotten of like how a firm is really using all these tools and building something. So thank you so much for the conversation. And I could keep going, but we'll stop here. And it was really great to talk to you.
thanks, Bonnie.